Happy Tuesday. Welcome to The Wife of Caesar. My name is Michelevian or Michelevian. Either's fine. As you know, The Wife of Caesar is Streiner's project to talk about corruption or anti-corruption using everyday words so that you and I can fight corruption in our day-to-day lives with a little bit more than just good intentions. And what is Streiner? Well, Streiner is an anti-corruption bureau, which is to say, it's just we're a firm, we're an office, a team of people, especially lawyers, and we try to help organizations fight corruption using the tools of the trade. Now, we'd like to thank you for joining us on a Tuesday. This is highly irregular, and next week we will pick back up and start recording on Monday. But today we had technicalities, so thank you for having us on Tuesday. As with every episode, we will talk about a piece of news, a case, and a typology. The piece of news today has to do with a Mexican federal public official called Manuel Bartlett. Now, he is famous or infamous, depending on how you look at it, for having served in public office for pretty much most of his life, or pretty much all of his professional life. Now, he has been a Secretary of State at the federal government level, a governor of one of the states of Mexico, a congressperson several times over, a senator several times over, and pretty much he has stayed his entire life in the public sector. And today he is the director, he is the director of CFE, Comisión Federal de Electricidad, which is a Mexican state-owned business in charge of producing, generating, and distributing electricity to Mexico, the sole distributor in electricity in Mexico. Now, the commission is not exactly a public agency. However, it is a state-owned entity, and as a state-owned, that's just fancy speak for it's a business, and the shareholder is the government. And because the shareholder is the government, whomever holds the position of director is, by definition, a public servant. The main issue here that's been discussed widely in the news over the last week is a piece of investigative journalism a report that apparently shows that Bartlett controls, owns, or somehow has access to over 800 million pesos. That's about $4 million US in real estate, in property. And he owns or controls this either via trusts, corporations, other people, straw man, his family, his friends, things like that. Now, to make matters worse, the secretary in charge, a Secretary of State in charge of public oversight, has stated that this issue is not really an issue for her because the property was not acquired until at the time that he was a public official, which is not exactly true because, as I mentioned earlier, he has been jumping around from public office to public office for most of his life. It is technically true. It doesn't fall under the purview of her specific secretariat, but it does fall under the purview of someone. There's always someone, a public agency that's in charge of oversight, of overseeing that, congresspeople, senators, governors, even secretaries of state behave properly. Now, one of the major problems is that he failed to disclose ownership or control of these properties in his declaration of interests and wealth. Which is a standard requirement for all public officials, at least at the federal level. That is, in and of itself, that's not a major issue. The major issue here is that he might be accused of money laundering, and I will tell you why. As you know, money laundering is taking money that comes from illegal acts, from crimes, and passing it off as clean money, hence the term laundering. But also, that's the broad definition that's used all around the world. But at least in Mexico, it also covers having something and not being able to account, not being able to prove that something comes from legal acts. So if you own property and you cannot prove with certainty, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that you own it legally, then you might be accused of money laundering. Now, what needs to happen here is that there needs to be an official investigation to properly ascertain from where these properties came. That means essentially looking at public records and public deeds and figuring out who sold to whom and who bought from whom, and how this particular person came to control each piece of property. And if that shows that he controls it or owns it, either by himself or through strawmen, through people who lend him his name, then he might be proven to have committed several irregularities, among which might be money laundering. To top it off and to make things a little bit worse, the president has campaigned for several years, really, but for several months, on fighting corruption. However, we've talked about how political corruption is the manipulation of processes, the rules of the game, policy, the decisions that public officers make, or the laws to maintain power, maintain status, or maintain wealth. And in this particular case, he has, in a very outspoken way, condemned public officials accused of corruption. But on this particular case, he has been oddly quiet, oddly silent. And if he is deliberately refraining from prosecuting or investigating a public official in his charge for acts of corruption, then that by itself might mean political corruption on behalf of this particular person, Bartlett, but even on behalf of the president of Mexico. Okay, let's move on to the case. As you know, Transparency International is turning 25 years old this year, and to commemorate that, they have released a list of the most iconic corruption cases, or what they consider the most iconic corruption cases. And we're doing a rundown of this list and giving you our thoughts. Today, we will talk about Panama and former President Ricardo Martinelli. Now, Ricardo Martinelli was president of Panama from 2009 to 2014. And during his tenure, he was accused of many things, as most presidents and public officials are. And as most public officials are accused, he was accused of manipulating or rigging tenders. However, the major accusation leveled against him was not involving tenders, but involving public privacy. He allegedly, because he hasn't been proven guilty, spent around $100 million of Panamanian people money in investigating illegally tapping cell phones and other communications of public officials and also private citizens, which is, this sort of thing has been heard. It's not unheard of. Several people in the government, at least of Mexico, have also been accused of this. I think the main problem here is the amount that was allegedly spent and the level or the extent to which the government allegedly spied on its own people. The problem became so huge that Martinelli fled. He became a fugitive and spent his time in Miami. In 2018, the U.S. authorities located him in Miami, in Florida, and decided to extradite him to Panama to be tried for these crimes. However, when Martinelli was accused, one of the many accusations that was leveled against him was unduly influencing the judiciary, the judges, the courts. Allegedly, he had so much influence, corrupt influence over the courts that they could not function independently. And he was presented before these same courts, and he was acquitted of all charges based on a technicality. Essentially, the judge that tried the case examined the evidence presented by the state's attorney's office and by prosecutors, and decided that they had not fulfilled minor legal requirements and decided to dismiss the case. Most of the time, when people are acquitted on technicalities, we're talking about violations to human rights or to civil liberties. And when a judge dismisses a case based on those types of technicality, it is generally okay, because it would be very harmful and dangerous to society if people could be tried without respect for their human rights. But this is not what happened here. Here, the judge claimed that the prosecutor's office did not fulfill minor requirements on how to file claims, how to sue criminally the former president. Now, the prosecutor's office has appealed the case and is still today awaiting a resolution on that appeal. So we still don't know what the outcome will be on Martinelli's trial, but we will, of course, let you know. Okay, so let's move on to our typology. As you know, a typology is the concrete steps in which you do something, in which you do a specific thing. In this case, the concrete steps in which you commit a corrupt act. Today, we will talk about services not rendered. Now, as we've discussed, public procurement is the process by which governments buy things. They buy services, they buy goods because governments need things. Okay, great. A very common scheme in manipulating public procurement is finding a necessity, a need that the government has. The government needs to buy, X and Y thing, and then the person in charge of that process decides to benefit improperly from that tender. It's simply a matter of finding a friendly contractor and having him or her agree to pay you a cut of the contract, and that's it. But governments and some public officials, corrupt public officials, have become much more creative, and they've decided to fabricate necessities, to invent needs that don't really exist, and then benefit improperly from those needs. And to give you an example, what has happened over the past at least 8 years in Mexico and at the state level is that public officials have decided that they need opinions, professional, technical opinions on different matters. It might be finance, it might be accounting, auditing, the law, different things. Services that in the end yield nothing more than a report, pieces of paper that obviously or supposedly should contain poignant, elaborate, distinct, and sophisticated opinions on a particular matter. Some actual craft and actual work. But what has happened of late is that the public official decides that he or she wants money, so she decides that the government will hold a tender for a particular service. The government needs an opinion on finance, and they find a friendly firm, friendly to say corrupt, a friendly firm that is willing to issue that opinion, and they deliver the final opinion and get paid for it. But it turns out, and as it has happened in the past, that these opinions are mere articles copied and pasted from Wikipedia or from documents issued by think tanks like the OECD. And it's actually quite egregious. They just copy and paste, do some light formatting on the document, print it out, and deliver it to the government. And what's more scandalous about this is that they have been paid crazy amounts. In some cases, collecting over $100,000 for an article that was just downloaded in PDF form, lightly formatted, and then printed and delivered to the government. In any case, it's very hard to find these situations. When done properly, it's kind of hard to identify them because the light formatting might involve paraphrasing or changing some words. But some people are, they are so careless and so lawless that they just do copy and pasting, and it's fairly easy to identify those documents because you just have to copy a fragment of the document and paste it online on your favorite search engine, and that will yield you your results. Okay, so that's it for today. Thank you for joining us. As always, please blow the whistle. Please denounce every act of corruption that you come across. However, do it safely. If you're not sure whether or not what you're looking at is corruption, or you're not sure that you are physically safe, don't do anything. Reach out to someone who might be able to help you. Feel free to reach out to us at info@streiner.mx, or log on to streiner.mx and find detailed instructions on how to blow the whistle anonymously through the dark web so that you stay safe. But above all, stay safe, please. Okay, so thank you for joining us. This was The Wife of Caesar. My name is Michel Bien, or Michel Bien. Either is fine. And have a happy Tuesday.